Everyone want to go check your cars? Baruchim habayim b'shem Adonai, Baruch nichem mi beit Adonai. Blessed are you who come in the name of God. We bless you from this house of God. Tonight we are very, very blessed to be hosting Yachad and the Alliance for Middle East Peace, who have brought to us all the way from Israel-Palestine, Ibrahim Ibn Ahmad, who is the co-host of the Third Narrative podcast. We are very blessed and very excited to have them here. First of all, has it just got quieter because I was being too loud? Yeah, I was being too loud, wasn't I? First of all, each of the charities are going to come up and give you a little bit of an introduction about who they are and what they do. Then Ibrahim is going to talk for a little bit under half an hour, and then we're going to do questions and answers. Now, I had prepared in my head to give you all a warning about how important it was to give a KLS welcome, to be friendly and everything like that. And Ibrahim told me that he finds when people are not controversial, he gets bored. So, ask whatever questions you feel like asking, I suppose. Just remember to be human, remember to see the human, and remember that we all have to live with each other afterwards, so don't show anything about yourself that you don't want people to know. Eleanor, do you want to start? First of all, welcome Eleanor Mill from Yachad.
That's quite the applause. Thank you. It's very nice to be here. I'm going to speak for 2 minutes just to introduce myself and Yachad, which some of you will know. So yes, my name is Eleanor Mill. I am Director of Community Engagement at Yachad, which is a British Jewish organisation which promotes a two-state solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. So what we do is work within our own Jewish community and in Parliament. In our community, what we do is predominantly educational work, such as this, with our communal institutions, a lot with youth movements, some in Jewish schools, a lot of work with synagogues and others, including events like this. And in fact, we have a couple of events booked with you already for next year, so I will look forward to them. In Parliament, we work with British MPs cross-party, and the aim of that work is to make sure that they hear the broad diversity of views that exist within the British Jewish community on these issues. The thing that both of these pieces of work have in common is that what we really want everyone to hear is the voices that matter most, and those are obviously those of our partners in Israel and Palestine working for human rights and for peace. Ibrahim is such a great example of those, so I'm just happy to bring him here, and I hope you'll all enjoy the talk.
And now let's welcome Rachel Liss from the Alliance for Middle East Peace.
Thank you. Thanks, it's very good to be with all of you. So I'm Rachel, I am the policy coordinator at the Alliance for Middle East Peace. So ALMEP is a network of over 160 peace-building NGOs in Israel and Palestine. So all of our members work across civil society, so they might focus on education, on tech, on the environment, all across civil society, but the sort of underlying principle of all of the programs that they run is to bring Israelis and Palestinians and or Jews and Arabs together. So they work both within Israel, with Palestinian citizens of Israel and Israeli Jews, and cross-border with Palestinians in the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and Gaza, although right now, obviously, that's the Gaza section is not really happening. So most of my team are based in Israel and Palestine, working directly with our members, and it's this idea that we want to create a peace-building field as a whole. So all of these small organizations, it's much better if they operate as a whole field and do cross-collaboration between organizations and really build up this kind of movement for peace. And then internationally, so I'm in London, I've got a colleague in Paris, a colleague in Berlin, and a colleague in DC. We all speak to our governments to make sure that they are highlighting and championing the voices of peace builders in Israel and Palestine. So my work in the UK, similarly to Yachad, who I work closely with, I speak to parliamentarians and ministers and try to make sure that they are seeing the need to empower grassroots organizations in Israel-Palestine as a way to bring a sustainable resolution to this conflict. So we kind of look at the bottom up that needs to go with the top down, and we're trying to bring that bottom up. And Ibrahim is part of our network, and we're obviously so privileged to have him here. I've been working with him the past 2 weeks, sort of taking him around London and speaking to a bunch of different people. And so Ibrahim, we're very excited to come hear from you.
Hold on, I can't have this. I need to look at people. No, I want to look at the people. First of all, thank you again. And really, it's a blessing, an honor, a privilege to be with your community here today. And sharing with you my story and where we come from in my community. My name is Ibrahim Abu Ahmed. I come from the city of Nazareth. And I particularly come from a community that is not really talked about. And it's kind of undermined or sometimes really behind the scenes, or it's not a community that is talked about a lot when we talk about the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. We're a community that is actually a very unique one, but it's still a community that is not discussed much when we're talking about the conflict, especially when we talk about solutions for the conflict. And the community that I come from is a community of Palestinian-Israeli community. Now, when we say Palestinian-Israeli, we tend to we think about the conflict, not about something in two identities combined into one. And the question is, where does that come from? Where does this community come from? And I think the best way to describe it, and maybe we'll start with a little bit of the politically correct terminology. So in general, our community are referred to as Arab citizens of Israel. We're Arabs, and we're citizens of Israel. But we also come from the Palestinian people, so that's why I'm referring to it as Palestinian-Israeli or Palestinian citizens of Israel. Now, I think the best way to start to talk about the specific and special place that my community holds, and I was thinking about it, and where should I start? How can I bring together the complexity that my community and my reality has? And I was thinking actually that perhaps it is by talking about the week that I had of October 7th. So on that day, I was living in the area of Tel Aviv with Jewish roommates. Actually, I was in the north, and the majority of our community does live in the north. Ironically enough, a night before I was at a wedding. And I wake up, not at 6:30 because I wasn't in the center. We didn't have sirens in my community in the north. But I woke up at 9:30. And I woke up to a message from my roommate. And it was a new roommate. We've only known each other for a month. And he sends me a message and asks me, hey, can you translate this video for me from Arabic? The first thought in my head, I literally woke up and it was the first message I saw, and in my mind was like, okay, now he has an Arab roommate, he wants me to translate funny videos from Arabic. That was my initial thought. And then I look at it, and it was the video of Hamas taking control over one of the tanks. And I started to try to understand what is it that I'm seeing. So I wake up and starting to see the videos that were started to rush in and the horrors that we were seeing on that day, and in particular starting to see what was happening in the Nova party. And me and my friends started to call each other, contact each other. What's happening? Are you okay? Are your family okay? Are your friends okay? I'm asking my friends if they know anyone who was in the party. If I was in the party, if I know anyone who was in the party, I could have been in that party. Any one of my friends could have been in that party. And by midday, I realized that I had 4 friends with 6 family members missing. And at that time, I felt really helpless and not realizing how can I be of any value at this kind of a dark hour, and no one knew what's happening and no one knew what's going to happen next. So I told them, send me their photos. Maybe I can go on a telegram in Arabic that you might not find, and maybe I can find a video where I can locate them. So the second half of my day on October 7th was me sitting with my screen on my laptop with these 6 photos in front of me and just scrolling from a video to a video to a video to a video, and all the horrors that a lot of us have seen, zooming in, trying to figure out if that face is the face of my friend's family member. And unfortunately, I was unsuccessful. And by the end of the day, I realized that all of their family members, all 6 were killed. 2 of them we realized later on. But that was my experience. It was experience of me being with my friends, me not realizing what's happening, me trying to help my own friends, seeing what's happening on the news, and seeing my community also being there. Doctors, our community is a community of 20% of the population in Israel. But we're 25% of doctors, 30% of nurses. We're a very active community. And our community was there. The next day, October 8th, I wake up, and my sister was at that time living in Jerusalem, and I was still having all my stuff in Tel Aviv area. And I was calling all my friends, my Arab friends, Palestinian Israeli citizens. And I'm calling them, and we're talking to each other, hey, we need to leave the center. And we all agreed that we can't be in mixed cities. We can't be in predominantly Jewish cities. Because we felt that we might get the payback of what happened the day before. That maybe somebody's gonna hear me on the street in my neighborhood, where everybody around me is Jewish and I'm the only Arab person, and somebody's gonna hear a word, and it's gonna be triggered, and he could attack me. Maybe somebody lost a brother, a father. Maybe someone still has family missing. And even though it was still in the middle of a chaos, and the majority of the Arab community does live in the north. So we decided we need to go back to the north. And I drove to Jerusalem in the middle of the chaos, not knowing where I'm going, like if I'm gonna see anything on the way, if I'm gonna get stopped, anything is gonna happen, but I knew that I need to get my sister. And I need to get her out of there. Because she also lived at that time in Western Jerusalem, where everybody around her was Jewish. Because we felt that we might be targeted. A couple days after that, I'm calling my friends in Gaza. And I had friends that I've met throughout my years, people who worked in interfaith programs, who worked in leadership programs. And I'm calling everybody. I'm trying to figure out what's happening to them. People started to march to the south. And I'm trying to understand what's happening to their family. Are they going to the south? Are they okay? And what can I do to help them? And later on, realizing that I have friends who have family members who were shot in their leg in one occasion, 13-year-old boy. And on other occasions, people who had chronic diseases, who had no way to get any medical treatment. And collectively, me and a group of my friends, who was working in the peace work for a long time, we decided to create a network and try to help our friends from Gaza. And calling every single embassy that we can in order to see how we can get them out. How we can ensure that they can get medical treatment. How we can ensure that they'll be okay, that they'll be safe. And it's been a work that a lot of our community has been doing ever since. So those 3 layers of emotion is what is unique to my community. Is having a mutual fear with everybody else in the country, having a fear of our neighbors, after we were fearful with our neighbors, and then fearing for our people who are across the border. And that's unique to our community. That's really what signifies our community in specific. Now, the question is, where does it come from? Where do all these layers that my community, my specific community, why does it have all these 3 layers of identity? And to bring that, I'll tell you my grandmother's story. My grandma was born in Bethlehem. Bethlehem is today part of the West Bank. She was born there in 1941. And she was raised in Ramallah after that until 1948. She went to a kindergarten in Ramallah. And in 1948, my great-grandfather at that time, under the British mandate, was a patrol officer, a police officer. And he was sent to the north. Our family was from the north, but they lived in Ramallah because Ramallah was the headquarters of the police at the time. So they asked my great-grandfather to go to the north. There were clashes between the Arab and the Jewish community in Tiberias. So they lived there for a few months. And after that, moved back to my family's home village of Turan. And after that, he decided to desert his post. And he decided to fight and to participate in the war. And he went and he fought in a community called As-Sajara, or now that community doesn't exist anymore. The people there expelled. And the community is now called today Ilaniya, which in Hebrew is also like a type of a tree. As-Sajara is also in Arabic, tree. And he was shot and killed in that war. So my grandma, at the age of 7, lost her father, and the plane started going over their community's heads, and they seen the bombardments, and they started fleeing from the community for their lives and marching to the north, towards Lebanon. Because there was a perception that if we get to Lebanon, maybe the situation will calm down, and we'll come back. We'll come back to our community when things die down. And they started marching barefoot, on foot, to the north. But while they were marching to the north, they realized that our community, and they heard rumors that the community, there was no more fighting in there anymore. And they can also just come back, and they'll be fine. And they decided, and they didn't know that, they just heard rumors. But they really wanted to go back to their community. They wanted to go back to their own houses. They wanted to go back to their own place, around where their family. So they started marching back, and they went back and got back to their town. And that town, that territory, that area, became part of the newly established state of Israel. And from that point, they were living as part of the state of Israel. But they were living under martial law. From 1948 to 1966. And my grandma at that time was one of the first people who was studying to become a teacher in our community. And every time she had to leave, she would need the military approval to get out of the town, because you couldn't leave the town without a military approval. So she would get out, she would go with the head of the mayor of the community, get the approval of the army, and be able to go to Tiberias. And that's the story of my grandmother, and the story of so many others in my community. And that's her, what we call Nakbi, which is like the catastrophe of our community. That's it. It's my grandma's story. It's her suffering. It's her losing her father. And we get that question of, where's your connection with the Palestinian? You guys are Israeli citizens. In Israel, we're referred to as Arab Israelis, or Israeli Arabs. And it's not by coincidence. It's a term used to separate us from the rest of our people. But the reality is, if my grandma stayed in the West Bank, their grandchildren, we would have been today Palestinians in the West Bank. If they continued to Lebanon, we would have been Palestinian refugees in Lebanon. So our citizenship as a community was determined by where our grandparents ended up in 1948. Wherever you ended up, that's what created your new civil identity. And after 1966, the community became citizens, and that's where we come from. And that's where our story comes from. When I was growing up, as a little kid in the 1990s, my mom didn't want me to be raised with all these political and her family trauma. And she wanted to give me an innocent childhood as much as possible. To not know of our parents' story too much, not to focus on the political aspects. There was also a fear of, you don't want your children to be overly politicized. You can be looked at differently or have really harsh. And my mom is a humanist, and she wanted me to be raised as a humanist. And not to look at people as religion or skin color, and treat people just as people. And that's the values that my mom raised me with. Now, in the majority of cases in Israel, our communities live very separate lives. The majority of the Arab community lives in all Arab towns. And Jewish community lives in all Jewish towns. Except, of course, mixed cities like Haifa, like Akka, Akko, where we have mixed communities, and even there, you feel like you live separate lives as well. Because we as children, you live and you go to separate schools. So we don't get to meet each other. And the first time that you get to meet an Arab or a Jewish person, it's usually, and I don't mean going to the store and buying something, or finding them on the street and passing by. I mean really meeting somebody and sitting with them and talking to them really. For a lot of cases, it's in the university. Sometimes for the Jewish community, it's in the army, or if they go to the police. But it's never the humanistic interaction until you get to university. So what happens there, or in work, when you finish school and you go to get a gap year and you started working, and that's where you first time you meet somebody from the other. So what happens is that for the majority of cases, people meet the politics before they meet the people. And when that happens, when you meet the other, you have already an 18, 19, 20-year perception of a different person, and it's really hard to change it, because you have a very political perception of who the other person is. In my personal case, it was actually the opposite. Because my cousins, and I'm very lucky for that, because my cousins grew up in a Jewish community at that time. It was an all-Jewish community, and they were the only Arabs there. Until today, if you mention their names, they will tell you from that community, oh yeah, Tariq and Ali, we know them. They were the only Arab kids at that time, and they're twins, so it's easy to figure them out. And as a little 4 or 5-year-old, your cousins are your best friends, so you go to your cousins all the time. And they grew up in a Jewish kindergarten. So actually their first language was Hebrew, rather than Arabic, which was a very unique case in my cousin's reality. And when I used to go to my cousins, they would speak more Hebrew than Arabic, and all their 4 or 5-year-old friends are all Jewish. And they start talking in Hebrew, and I don't know a word in Hebrew. And I would struggle to okay, I'm a kid, and all I want is to play with the kids. And as my mom raised me as a humanist, my perception was, okay, we're just people who have different languages. So what can I do? I can just learn the other people's language. And they would always talk about the kids' shows that they would watch on the kids' channel in Hebrew, I would say Ladin for anyone who's Israeli. So I started watching that, so I can also connect with them on the kids' show stories. So when I got to first grade, I already spoke Hebrew, fully, because I got to learn the language. And my first political awakening after that, of realizing that we're not just people who speak different languages, there's a political reality in here, was actually in the year 2000, in the Intifada, the second Intifada. In my reality, the second Intifada was happening on my doorsteps, because our community at that time rose and protested in Nazareth, because I was born and raised in Nazareth, and our community started to protest, and I was living on the outskirts of the city. And our immediate neighboring city was a predominantly Jewish community. So when we rose up and protested in our street, the Jewish community joined in, and there was a line between the two communities, and they both kind of clashed in the middle. The police arrives, the guns were directed in one direction. It was directed at us. And we had 3 people shot and killed by the police on my street. And then I started to understand that we're not just people who have different religion or different language. There's also a political reality in here, and trying to grasp that as an 8-year-old. And of course, those 3 years of the Second Intifada had a lot of bombings, and we had explosions in malls and in buses. And sometimes what people forget is that we were also afraid to go to malls, to go to buses. But then when we would, or be in an area that is predominantly Jewish, I could see as an 8-year-old, 9-year-old, 10-year-old, you look at other people, Jewish people around me, and I'm seeing people who look at me with fear in their eye. And I'm 10-year-old. I'm seeing them look at my mom with fear. And look at my family, and it was a surreal experience of seeing that someone is afraid of me just for who I am. But that's because I met the people first. It didn't make me put me in a place where I'm resentful. But I was very frustrated. I remember one time as a 9-year-old kid, I went to, and my mom would tell me that story, that she wanted me to like go out of Nazareth and go to like a playground. And there was only like me and another Jewish kid there. And I speak Hebrew fluently, so I just go to the kid, I'm like, hey, you wanna play? And we just play. And his mom comes to my mom, he's like, how is your son playing with my son? He's like, what do you mean? They're kids. Like, he saw another kid, he's the only kid here, so they wanna play. But for her, it was unimaginable that this Arab kid would play with a Jewish kid. How is that possible? And I remember asking one time my mom, like after we were in a Jewish community at that time, like I think we were in the mall, and we come back, and there was riots, and I go to my mom, and I'm like, why do we have to be born Arab? Or if anything, if we're born Arab, I see all these Arab countries around us, because I was also watching the kids channel in Arabic, and you would have things from all across the Middle East, and I'm like, why can't I be like them? Where they're a majority, and they're all Arab together. Why be in a place where we're the other? Where we're a minority who looked at differently? And that's the innocent question of an 8, 9, 10-year-old. And with that, I started to want to learn more about my family story, our own identity, and where we come from. And then I started to learn my grandmother's story. Because my grandma also had her trauma. My grandma till today, when she talks about her father, like she's in tears. Like she struggles to talk about her father. And we actually got her on the podcast to talk about it. So you can also look at her story. She was brave enough to share like the full family story with 2 other brave women who talked about their stories from 1948. And I got to learn more and more with the years about our own reality. But I had a confliction of these identities together. We're Israeli citizens, everything is in Hebrew. I watch the kids' channel in Hebrew. Meanwhile, we have a Palestinian story behind. How do all these things come together? And it was very hard. And when I went to university, and I went to the American University in Cairo, and I went in 2011, and I was actually going there to study psychology. But 2011 was in the height of the Arab Spring. And I was there during the Arab Spring, seeing 1 million people in the street, and the Egyptian people calling for democracy, freedom, equality, and seeing them taking down a dictatorship of over 30 years. When I saw that, I had an epiphany of, this is what I was meant to do. If they can do it, why can't our community do something about it? And I also went to the university, I continued my university because I couldn't stay in Egypt. I continued in the US, and seeing the challenges of the Black community in the US, and how they overcome so much, and how far this community have gone. And I saw that the people have the ability to create change, and to create change on the ground. And for me, the perception was, if the Black community can come from a place where you are looked at as less than a human, from slavery to someone becoming the president, so we can create a change, and you can change hearts and minds. So when I came back and I graduated, I decided to go back home. And one of the things I started to do was doing speaking engagements, something very similar to what we're doing today. And I was talking about my community. Because as I said before, our community is, the terminology given to our community is Arab-Israeli, or Israeli-Arab, where the term Palestinian doesn't exist. Our peoplehood element doesn't exist. And the way I was able to solve my identity crisis or challenge, and I had my ups and downs, was the perception and understanding that I can just accept everything. This is who we are. This is our reality. We have 2 things with us at the same time. We're part of the Palestinian people, but we're also part of the Israeli society. And it doesn't have to be either or, because we're part of the people, and we could have been in any of those realities. We could have been in the West Bank, we could have been refugees. We have family who left and ended up in Gaza. We had family who ended up refugees in Lebanon and in Jordan. And we became Israeli citizens. But at the same time, we're also not de facto citizens. As I mentioned, our community is an active community. We're roughly 20% of the population, but we're 25% of doctors. We are 30% of nurses, 30% of lawyers, 60% of pharmacists. And it's a joke in Israel that every pharmacist you see, in Israel, it's either Arab or Russian. And I'm here to tell you it's true. And so our communities live together. We have separate realities, but we are not separate from one another. When two Arabs in my community speak to each other in the north, they use a lot of Hebrew in their slang. We have mixed with each other's cultures. And understanding that, we have so many similarities. We're all loud, we're all late all the time, and our communities are very similar in a lot of attitudes. We just have better food, that's like the only thing, but it's true. But also for the Jewish community, they use so much Arabic in their slang. Israeli Jews don't only use Hebrew. Anyone knows what's the most Israeli word used? What's the most Israeli word out there? Yalla. What's yalla? It's ya Allah. Oh God. Like, come on, it's like, let's go, like from God, like God take me, ya Allah, let's go. Like with the blessing of God. And it's an Arabic word and it's the most Israeli term out there. And there's so many times that people use, and I do this with a lot of my Jewish friends, and I ask them about certain words, and they have no idea that the word they're using is actually Arabic. They are sure it's Hebrew. I'm like, you know that it's Arabic. The only time they always know is when they curse in Arabic, because they know that it's Arabic, and they know that they're cursing in Arabic. But it's all right, we're more passionate when we curse in Arabic, so they want to do that too. So our communities mix together a lot. And then I had the realization that I want to talk about these things, and I had I started to see that, you know what? Our community, in fact, is the one that holds the key to the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. Because we're the only community out there that speaks both languages. Because we have it mandatory in school. And I mean fully mandatory. From 1st grade to 12th grade. It's mandatory in our schools. Where it's not the case in the Jewish community. You learn it for 2 or 3 years, and then it becomes an elective, and mainly you start to learn like political terminologies, like how to say prime minister, and how to say minister of defense, and all these very political terms, but never how to talk. How to really talk to the people. How to engage. And that's unique to us. So we're the only ones who speak both languages. We're the only ones who live this dual reality. We're the only ones that have doors to both communities, and we can see the world from both eyes. A Palestinian eye and an Israeli eye. We can see both fears, both pains, both sufferings, both aspirations, both cultures. We're the only one that could bring these two things together. And I saw that we have the key. And I'm saying the key, and I'm saying not using the term bridge. Because I had a friend who told me, don't use the word bridge. Don't bridge the conflict. Bridge. We shouldn't be the bridge between the two Israeli and Palestinian communities. Because a bridge is something you cross and you leave behind. And we shouldn't be left behind. And I wanted to talk about these things, and I started to do it. For 5 years, I've been speaking to as many groups as possible to talk about Palestinian identity, Palestinian peoplehood. In Israel, one of the biggest challenges is people denying that there's such a thing called Palestinian people. And we can, if you want to ask me about it, and I have an answer for that. And we'll talk about what is a peoplehood. And we can if somebody wants to ask that question, no problem. And then, October 7th happened, the beginning of the war. And as I said, I was trying to do as much as possible to help all my friends from 2 sides of the border. And then I was also looking at the news and looking at the international community and seeing that there are 2 narratives out there that was started to be created. That there's only one way to be pro-Israeli and one way to be pro-Palestinian. And they're very polarized sides. And if you're pro one, as if you should be anti the other. If you're pro-Palestinian, you should be anti-Jewish or anti-Israeli. And if you're pro-Israeli, you have to be anti-Palestinian or anti-Arab or anti-Muslim. And these two polarized voices have become so loud and taken ownership of what it is to be a Palestinian, of what it is to be an Israeli. And we wanted to reclaim that. Because we recognize that there's so much spectrum in the middle. You can be pro your people, but not demonize the entire other group, and not dehumanize an entire people. And if you don't have any personal attachment to the land, it's not about picking sides, it's about helping us find solutions. It's about looking for what we can do in order to make sure that this doesn't happen again. Because especially for my community, and especially for my people in Gaza, it was very important to me that we talk about it. Because the world has risen before to our people in Gaza. It happened in 2008, and putting pressure on Israel to stop wars. And it happened in 2008, and it happened in 2012, it happened in 2014, it happened in 2021, and now this. And every time we had a ceasefire, the world went back to its normal life. But there was no normal life in Gaza. And every time, it's until the next cycle happens. And what we wanted to say is that this has to be the last time. That we want the world to stand. We want the world to talk about it, but not to forget us, and not to forget our people. And the only way to ensure that it won't happen again, and that we also don't go back to the reality of October 6th, because October 6th wasn't peace, is to talk about solutions. And solutions that will ensure that our people, and both of them, can live in dignity. And that's where we came up with our podcast. Me and my colleague and my friend, and I say my better half, Amira, from East Jerusalem. And we also talked about different identities and different realities that we have. Her reality in East Jerusalem, my reality as an Israeli citizen. Her community is not an Israeli citizen. She specifically is, but the vast majority of people in East Jerusalem are residents and temporary residents of East Jerusalem. And I want to talk about the different elements of the Palestinian peoplehood, because we're a very wide spectrum of people. And to bring in this nuance, the complexity, to understand the layers and the challenges, and to talk about solutions. Because for us, this is how we end our podcast, and I guess we'll end this segment of the talk, is that we always want to remind our listeners that at the end of the day, all of us, Palestinians, Israelis, Arabs, Jews, Muslims, Christians, Druze, which is another community that lives there, and others, and every single person who lives between the river and the sea deserves better. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Such a wonderful.
Get water real quick.
Yes, please go get water. And we'll take questions now. So, you're already ready. All right, fantastic. Should we stack a few? Should we get like 2 or 3 questions at once? Or okay, yeah.
Hello, my name is David.
Pleasure.
I congratulate you for your courage.
Thank you.
Coming and speaking in front of us. I sort of had a lot of questions in my mind of what to ask you. But if you look at the Druze community, for instance, that are well integrated into Israeli society, would you consider that they are more or less equal citizens up to a point in Israel? But if Palestinians or Israeli Arabs had similar rights and similar standing in society, in Israeli society, would you consider this as an integrated or a solution for, how do you use your words, Israeli-Palestinians? Is that something that you think it would be workable, or are we talking about, I think you're not talking about the two-state solution, and possibly you're talking about an integrated solution, so to speak, for both communities.
Okay. Thank you for your question.
Do you want to do one at a time?
Oh, it's a long question, so I'm going to have to... it's like with the two-state solution, the Druze community, all these things. First of all, about the Druze community. The Druze community is going to have, in my feeling, something is going to explode after this war. Because the Druze community are citizens. They have conscription, where our community doesn't have conscription to go to the army. The Druze community does. But at the same time, the Druze community, and this is the best way to show the biggest issue in the state of Israel, and particularly with the last few governments that we had, is that even with a community that serves in the army, super integrated in the society, the nation law still happened. And they protested immensely, and nobody cared. There's a lot of people who protested with them, but the law did pass and included them in not being part of what this nation state law pursued as who is the homeland for. And they protested immensely against it, and it still happened. Now, one of the members of the Knesset, Avigdor Lieberman, for instance, is now, like, he went to one of the Jews soldiers who was killed in Gaza, and he was talking about how, this law was wrong and it wronged them, and the Jewish community has the term, they call them brothers in blood. But he voted for that law. Okay, and the other thing is that we hear all the time, especially now, the Druze community going out there, because we have an issue of lack of expansion of Arab communities. We don't have expansion of Arab towns, highly underdeveloped, highly underexpanded. We're not getting more land to expand and live, and we don't have anywhere else to go. And then if you go to Jewish communities, they're like, oh, the Arabs are coming to our communities. Where are we supposed to go? Where are we supposed to go? Why don't we have new Arab towns being built? We haven't had any. We need more Arab towns. And especially when you live in a very conservative village and you want to have a different kind of reality, but you don't want to live in a mixed city, for instance. But for the Jewish community, you have that option. You have communities that are Zionist religious, kibbutzim who are only for a certain group of people, moshav who has a very... And you get selected to be going to wherever you want to, and you select what kind of a community you want to go to. For us, it's only the existing ones. But the same issue exists for the Druze. They serve in the army, they're brothers in blood, but they have zero, like they have no expansion of their communities, and a lot of them are building illegally because they're not giving them permits to build. And there was dozens and dozens and dozens of cases, especially now, coming out and saying, we have a lawsuit and they're going to come and destroy our house, and they're suing us for hundreds of thousands of shekels because we're building illegally, and here we are fighting in Gaza. And that's going to explode at the end of this war. So if that happens to them, with everything that they're doing in order to be integrated, what is it going to be for us? And when we look at them, we see, okay, whatever you do, you're never going to be equal. If the Jewish community who's integrated in all these beautiful terms out there, and brothers in blood, and they're not getting expansions, they're not getting the things that they should deserve in order to improve their reality, so what's going to happen to us? So that's already a problem that even for the Jewish community exists. And to your question on how to create solutions, what I advocate for is actually this, is that the power to change the reality has to come from our community. Because again, like I said, our community is the only one that bridges both sides, that connects both sides. Because we're the only ones who have both realities. So, and the biggest issue that I hear from both Palestinians and Israelis is that there's no partner on the other side. Both communities claim that the problem is on the other side. And the biggest issue that we have in the Palestinian-Israeli conflict is the issue of trust. And me, as a child of Oslo, I would call it, because I grew up on the years of Oslo. I believe in two-state solution personally. And as a child of Oslo, I would say that what I started to realize is the biggest issue and the biggest mistake of that time is that then we tried to connect between Tel Aviv and Ramallah when Tel Aviv and Nazareth are not there. In order to create trust how are you trying to create trust with someone who are across the border when you don't have trust inside the border? When the trust is not existing fully between both our communities. As soon as something happens, our communities immediately look at each other as enemies and afraid of one another. The first thing that has to be built in order to create a change has to be from within. Education. And particularly education. So on that note, one of the key things that has to happen, in my view, is Arabic has to be mandatory in Jewish schools. You know, I always told my Jewish friends, if we are able to learn Arabic, Hebrew, and English from first grade, Arab kids are not smarter than Jewish kids. If we can do it, wallah, so can you. If we're able to speak it, you can also do that. And when I was in the years of Oslo, they brought me, it was after even Oslo, there was still an attempt to maintain that, hope of creating peace. And they brought my school and a Jewish school. We were 10 years old. So it was 2 years of us speaking. Back then, we only started learning Hebrew at second grade. Now it's first grade. So they're bringing these two schools. They brought us to their school, they came to our school, and it never happened again. And the reason why it didn't work, because here they are, bringing an Arab kid and a Jewish kid, and they're sitting them together, and look what they're telling us. You, the Arab kid, you have to speak in his language. And if you fail, there's no conversation. All the pressure is on this poor little 10-year-old Arab kid that you have to speak in the other person's language in order to create a connection, in order to create a conversation. Whereas, I'll toss a few Hebrew words that I know, you'll toss a few Arabic words that you know, and we'll figure it out. But that wasn't the case. And it has to be by mutual recognition. One of the things that I hear the most from a lot of people in my community, I just want to be recognized for who I am. There's no recognition of our Palestinian identity in Israel. We're not talked about 1948 in Israel. We don't get to learn in our education system about our own story of 1948. Unless you have a brave teacher who's going to do it separately. But it's not in the curriculum. And definitely the Jewish community doesn't learn about it. And I'm saying mutual recognition because we have to do that together. It's bizarre also that also our community doesn't have an understanding enough of what is Jewish fear. I had somebody who recently told me, an Israeli Jewish friend, who told me, my Arab friend doesn't understand, I don't see how she doesn't understand our fears. She tells me, okay, October 7th happened one day and that's it, but she can't grasp that we're afraid, that we have this trauma, and that it's not just, and the reason for that is that because when we learn Jewish history, the only thing we learn about the Jewish history is only the Holocaust. And it gives you a perception of, it was this one-time thing that happened, and that's it. We don't learn about pogroms. We don't learn about generational, being hunted for generations, and having that feeling of you're being hunted by the internet, like wherever you go, you're hunted as a Jewish person. We don't learn that. So we don't understand the other person's fears and where they actually come from. And that has to be the case. We don't go to Yad Vashem, the Holocaust Museum in Israel, as part of our education system. The first time I've ever gone was 2 years ago. And in order to create that change, it has to be in cooperation between our two communities. I advocate for an Arab-Jewish party. There'll be an equal party. We have one Arab guy in a Jewish party and one Jewish guy in an Arab party. It's not real. It has to be real, a party that brings both people together. And that will create a trust. And if there's a recognition of us for who we really are, we can convey that after that to the West Bank. And then to Gaza. Hey, you say there's no partner, finally there is a partner. They're recognizing our identity. They're learning about what's happened to us in their schools. We find partner on the ground. Now it's time for you to join. We can make that connection. But without mutual recognition and seeing that we can be partners on the inside, it's not going to happen. And I believe that it's still possible. Because in the 1990s, 2/3 of the Palestinians believed in two-state solution. And 2/3 of the Israelis. And 2/3 only with our community, by the way. It was less than 2/3 if you don't count the Arab community. It's not 2/3 of the Jewish community. But people, when you give them real hope, they will hang on to it, they will cling to it. But the problem is we haven't given real hope. There's no real, and when you give people a pragmatic solution to look for and they'll see that something is going to happen, they're going to take it. There was an influx of people going to Gaza in the 1990s. An influx of the Palestinians going to Gaza because they were believing that Gaza is going to be the next big thing, where it's going to be a successful place. So if you give, and people talk about, there's no hope now. Oslo and going for two-state solution was 5 years after the second Intifada, well, after the first Intifada, where there was no perception of there will be any connection between the two communities. 5-6 years later, here we are talking about two-state solution. The end of the second Intifada, 2003. 5 years later, we had Olmert Abbas discussions about two-state solution. So it's not impossible. When I was growing up in the years of Oslo, we used to draw doves and writing shalom and salam in both languages. Like there was a euphoria in the air. Like everybody felt that it's going to happen. But that 1/3, and there's always going to be that third, and actually statistically speaking, by when you look at it from an international relations perspective and political perspective, you need 2/3 in order to create peace. The problem is that 1/3 from each community that doesn't want it is going to do everything in their power to prevent it from happening. And back then, we let them win. Because back then, we saw some of the worst bombings was in the 1990s. Explosions on buses daily. And on the Palestinian side, trying to prevent two-state solution. And those 2/3 of the Jewish community, they were calling them, they are the sacrifice for peace. And they were trying to keep that alive, and people started to lose hope. And then on the Israeli side, we all know what happened. The prime minister was shot and killed by an Israeli radical. And they killed the peace. But we need to bring it back. We need to have peace as popular. It's just not popular right now. Nobody wants to hear it. And we need to bring that word back. And we need to own it. And if we give pragmatic steps in order to create it, people will take it. It's just we need to do it. That's what we've been doing. I hope that answers all your questions. I can talk forever, so shut me up. Stephanie raised her hand.
My question is more like an open question. You implied that your childhood and your cousins was fairly untypical, and I just wonder if you have any idea how many of your peers, Palestinian Israelis, Israeli Palestinians, feel in any way similarly to you. It's very open.
No, it's fine. Actually, my two best friends, they're brothers, and they actually also had a similar reality where they lived in a predominantly Jewish community. We knew each other later in life, but their reality was very similar. That they had issues in their own family, so they went to a Jewish community at the time, majority Jewish community, and the neighbors under them were Jewish Israelis. And when their parents were always working a lot, they would spend most of their days at their Jewish neighbors. So they also speak Hebrew very, very well and very fluently. And they also watch the Kids channel in Hebrew. And so later in life we met and we realized that that's why maybe we're so super close friends, because we have similar visions to the world. But I'm not saying that we need, and there are mixed schools. There are schools out there, I think 8, something like that, who are speaking, and you have an Arab and a Jewish teacher in every class. But there are only a few of them. And I'm not advocating that we all need to be in the same school. There is something about learning in your own language and learning more and focusing more about, for instance, the Arab culture and the general Arab history, and learning from the poems of the ancient history and things and from the Jewish perspective as well. But one idea that can be done, sister schools. That every extracurricular activity that you do is with a Jewish school, is with an Arab school. You go on a trip, you go together. From as early as possible. And to humanize one another, so we can meet the people before the politics. And I know, and they're not just the only cases. There are many cases that happen like that. Cases in Haifa, cases in Akko, in Lod, and in other places. But it's not the majority of both people. The majority of both people don't get to know one another. And that needs to change, in my opinion. I hope that answers the question.
Holly. Thank you so much for being here. I'm a listener of your podcast, you and Amira's podcast.
Thank you.
And yeah, thank you for everyone that's organised it. When I read the newsletter that you were going to be here, I was like, oh my goodness, this is incredible. So, but I just wanted to say that your podcast has definitely given me hope, because I stopped feeling so guilty about not wanting to take a particular side, and having the opportunity to hear that you can have empathy for both sides. You don't have to sit on the fence on one side or the other, as I feel like it's so important to just stand together in this in order to move forward and have a future. I find it really hard to think otherwise. That's just how my brain works. But also the fact that your favourite thing about Passover was the cleaning, because that's also my favourite thing as well. But yeah, you have to listen to the podcast, really good. But also, me and my mum did a DNA test, and we found out we had Middle Eastern, West Asian heritage, and that we had Palestinian cousins from Jordan.
Wow.
This was before October 7th, quite a few years ago. So it really did open my mind up even more, knowing that, and knowing that in some way we are all connected. But I just wonder, how do we change the mindset of those who don't want to have peace at this time and feel conflicted?
First of all, thank you for listening to our podcast, and I'm humbled. Because me and Amira can talk for hours and nobody's listening. What makes it valuable is people listening to it. Otherwise, it means nothing that we're talking. So I appreciate it. Thank you. On the concept of how we can bring hope to people who lost hope, or we can bring, I think one of our biggest issues that we see, is that the two polarized voices are the loudest ones so far. I don't know if they're the majority. I know that they're the loudest. And the reason why they're the loudest, in my opinion, is that they feel that they have a community with them. They're part of a community, that they're not alone. That people who speak in a different way, that want to talk about solutions, that want to show empathy to both people, don't feel that they're part of a community. They feel that they're alone. And actually, one of the things that was created on its own, me and Amira didn't plan it, but there started to become a third narrative community in different cities. So we've gone to Berlin, and there was a community there. We've gone to Paris, there was a community there. We came to London, there was a community here. We had an event here in London. And these amazing people with Alnep and helped us, and another organization I can tell you about, Solutions Not Science, and this is why we came here. We came as Palestinian and Israeli speakers to speak in schools together, to show that, these people exist. People who want to talk about a different reality, a different path. And they made my life so easy, speaking with someone like Barak, who works for the Arava Institute. And Barak is working tirelessly with the Arava Institute to bring humanitarian aid to Gaza. And he's the manager of 4 refugee camps in Gaza, sheltering 10,000 people. And they're building another camp for 5,000 more people. And between every session that we had in these high schools, he's on the phone. How can we get more humanitarian aid in? Bring it, and he's shouting at the people from the, his point of contact who knows someone in the army, get this in, get this humanitarian aid. And we brought this and we did that. And a truck fell over and it's on the road towards the refugee camps. And how are we going to get this? And working with it tirelessly. And these people exist. And to humanize people that work for something better. And I think it takes time, but we need to be louder. We need to amplify voices who speak that way, and they exist. One of the biggest problems is that the algorithm of social media is not on our side. But we need the world to speak up, and for us to be a community of people who are talking about these things, and to be bold. And to speak up and to say, yes, we humanize each other, even if it's going to be sometimes at a price. I have people who are not happy that I'm speaking. And I knew it the second I put the mic and the camera into my face, but I didn't care. Because for me, it was all about my Northern Star is that I know I'm doing it for the best interest of my people. Even if you disagree with me, I know that my people in Gaza, I'm doing it for them. And I'm doing it for my Israeli friends. And regardless of what people like or don't like what I do, I'm going to do it anyways. And we're going to need to do that, and we're going to need to be a community, and we're going to need to be louder and speak about these things, and to show that there are these Jewish people who want peace. Yeah, they exist. There are these Palestinians who want peace and better life. Yes, they exist. And we wanted to bring it to the world. And I think we, as all of us, as a community, as people who want to talk about a different reality, and to have a different reality, we need to be louder. So that's, I think, it's going to take time. It's not, but again, we had a 5-year period between each intifada and discussions of 2 states. So from the lowest points, we can only get higher. And I'm a believer. I believe, I'm a realist. I know the situation is really bad, I would say. We're in a synagogue, so I'm not going to curse. The situation is really bad. But doesn't mean that it's impossible to create change. But we need to speak up. And to use the word peace, we need to re-own it and to make it popular again. Because it was popular in the past, and we need to go against those voices that are radical, that are going against us, and it's going to be hard. But we have no other choice. I think that's like the key component. Is that this is why we spoke, because we felt we have no other choice. This is the only thing that we can do. And by the way, on the going into cleaning in the Passover, so I was working in a Mahadran kosher restaurant in Tiberias, and the rabbi, me and him were very close friends, and I was like peckering him like, why do you do this? Why do you do that? What's the clean? And also I love the fact that we can't have yeast, and we had to finish all the beer, so in the restaurant. So it was cleaning while drinking. It was fantastic. And I would ask the rabbi, and he's like, yeah, this is the essence of Judaism. He's asking questions, and he would like refuse to start the cleaning without me coming, because I'm like peckering him with questions because I want to know. And I would hope, for instance, to see more people protesting together from the world. Because sometimes it's like bizarre to me that we are able to bring Palestinians and Israelis together, to work together, to protest together, and we can't see that in the international community. It's heartbreaking. ULMEP has 168 organizations, Palestinian and Israeli, working for peace. 168. People don't know about it. But we on the ground, they exist. We need that more in the international community. I would love to see more protests between the Muslim and the Jewish community. There's so much between our two religions, so much connection between our two religions. Why can't we stand together? Because you know what? We see everything back home. Every protest, everything. We see everything that's happening in the international community. So if you bring that to us, that will create something on the inside. Yeah, the international community does believe it. They're pushing us for it. Here they are, Muslims and Jews standing, and Christians. I come from Nazareth. And it's a big Christian community. Bring all 3 faiths together. Protest on a religious level. Because if we talk about instead of a nationalist element of Israel, Palestine, from the international community, and there's these political conflictions, there's the religious element that brings humanity, that brings elements of all religions that talk about essentially the same thing. Humanity, people, respect, love, and life. And that connects between all of us. And especially between the Muslim and the Jewish community. We're so similar. Maybe the only argument that we have is who was Abraham's favorite son. Because in Judaism it was Isaac, and Islam it was Ishmael in Hebrew. And like who did he choose to essentially kill because he was the favorite? But that's the biggest argument that we have, right? Like it's something that happened so long ago. But other than that, everything is so similar. And we're just fighting who's the favorite son, and we're cousins. So why not bring that together? My aunt did the DNA test. 7% Ashkenazi Jews. Don't ask me where it came from. My great-great-grandmother, I don't know what she did, but she had a lover somewhere. But we're the same people.
Hello.
Hi.
I think I'm the youngest one here right now. My question is...
What's your name, sorry?
Emine.
Imne.
Hello. My question is, I think you said you studied university in USA.
Mm-hmm.
So when you talk them, like, when you said them that you were like a Arab person that lived their life in Israel, did you get judged by them? By people, American people? Like, what was their opinion about you? Did you feel more free in the USA? Or was it like they were still judging you because who you are? Like,
It's a great question.
I'll repeat the question. You studied at university in America. Did you find that you were more free in America or that people were judging you more over there?
Was I more free? And like it's two sides, right? If I was more free there, and if I was judged by others. In the more free, the one thing I felt really more free about is, for instance, wearing the keffiyeh. Because I feel I'll be looked at in a very political way if I wear it back home. And I wore it throughout my years in the university there, and I was very proud of it. Because the keffiyeh for us, it's not a political thing. It became a political thing. But the first essence of the keffiyeh is a cultural thing. Like the black and white and the red and white, their essence was before, and now it's the black and white became Palestinian and the red and white became Jordanian. Whereas before 1948 and before these two states were two, before the two identities and peoples, it was summer and winter. My grandpa used it in the summer to cover from the sun, and he was a shepherd. And he would use it to lay on the grass when the sheep are eating, and then use it to pray. It was a practical tool, and to cover his head from the winter. And that was, but in Israel, if you wear it, they think that you're the terrorist or something. Like that's definitely something that I felt more free, that I can be more Palestinian there, because it was part of also my education, also to like. Learning about my own reality, asking my grandfather these questions throughout the years of my university, learning more about the Palestinian history, reading more books. So I felt I was more free to do that in the US. But in terms of being judged, to be honest, I studied there a long time ago. I know I look young, but back then it wasn't that political. Like no one really like put that much pressure on me that I'm an Israeli citizen. And I would talk about it. I would say, yeah, I'm a Palestinian and an Israeli citizen. And people wouldn't be as like judgy. But my freshman year was in the American University in Cairo. It was in Egypt. And there, the first week I was there, I had someone, we were sitting all together and we were talking where we're from, and I was telling them about my reality, and she just looks at me and was like, wait, how can you be both Palestinian and Israeli citizen? What do you mean? You guys must be traitors. You know, with everything that my grandparents had to go through and going through in Nakba, this is what we get. You know, I had one person who asked me on the tour, and that was maybe the one time that I had like a really like tough question in that sense of judging is, why didn't you bring a real Palestinian? That really was frustrating to me, because you know, we're part of the Palestinian people. We have just our reality. We were 150,000 people who remained in their land. Like, we still harvest our trees every year, our olive trees. We are still connected to our people, but we're also Israeli citizens. We can't change our reality. This is who we are. And we're not just a monogamist identity. That there's a perception of, the world has its own perception of what it is to be a Palestinian. It feels to me sometimes that we're judged as if the only way to be a Palestinian is to be under the rubble. But if we look at the West Bank, for instance, and in general, the Palestinian people, we have the highest literacy rate in the Arab world. Our people are educated. We're one of the highest PhD candidates in the world. Our people love life. They love to travel, they love to study, they value education, and they love to see the world. This is what a Palestinian. And yes, part of our people are under the rubble. And that's why I'm using my privilege to be an Israeli citizen, to be able to travel. Because we had other friends of ours from the West Bank who would want to come to, for instance, and we talked about it when Alnep took us to the Foreign Office, and they asked what are the things that we can do. And one of the things was, you have to stop preventing them from getting visas. And sometimes our people are trying to get from the West Bank, and peace activists from the West Bank, who are saying the same thing that I do, but they're unable to travel. They're unable to travel. They deserve to travel too. And there's no reasons for the prevention of these visas. So, but if I'm able to travel, so I'll bring their voice out there. I'll talk to on my people's behalf. And I talked to that person, I explained our story. And the vast majority of students in Egypt at that time, it was more surprise than judgment. I had like people in my generation back then who were like, wait. You can be a Palestinian and Israeli citizen? What do you mean? I thought Israel is all Jews and Palestine is all Arabs. Where did you guys come from? And they literally were like, can I see your passport? Can I see an Arab name on an Israeli passport? I'm like, yeah, sure. They were like, can we take a picture? I'm like, they were like, wow, this is crazy. I couldn't believe something like that happens. But yeah, that happens to us too. But like I would say to someone who asked me that, go tell my grandmother that she's not Palestinian enough after going everything that she's gone through. Having her father getting shot and killed in 1948 and going through Nakba herself. Like, where are the people? And I hope that answers your question.
So, you're doing really well for young people tonight. You're not the youngest person here. I think she's going to speak next.
Hi, my name is Claudia. I don't have a question, so I'm sorry in advance. It's more of a statement or something that I was reminded of when you were speaking. Was up until very recently, I am a teacher, but I was a teacher at a predominantly Muslim school, and I felt like I would out myself if I kind of told them that I was Jewish, and I did. Eventually, but I did receive like anti-Semitic comments and things from parents and children because they don't really understand. And after October 7th, I decided, right, we're going to have a conversation. And I had a conversation with they're 10 years old, and I said, we're going to talk about what do we know, what do we understand? And a lot of the children were Syrian refugees or from Afghanistan, so they had experience of, displacement and resonated a lot with the people in Gaza and Palestinians. And they didn't know any Jewish people. And so at the end of the conversation, I kind of said, well, you know one, me. And they felt really, I could see that they also felt like a lot of internal conflict. But I think by opening up and having those conversations, they're so much more educated. And I was like, by the end of that year, I was getting like Happy Hanukkah cards and all sorts of things from them. They were so sweet. So I do really believe in the message of educating and how it starts really young, and children they believe what they're told, and they you can mold their minds, and they're open to so much, and they accept so much, and you can just say, oh, actually, this side, and they don't really argue with it, they just take it on. So I just really felt that connection when you were talking about, going into schools and working together. So I just wanted to say that. So sorry that it's not a question.
No, it's okay.
And I love the podcast.
Hi, I'm Judith. I have a tad bit of a long-winded question, but I'll try to keep it short. So I go to high school, obviously, secondary school, whatever you want to call it. And I have a lot of Muslim, Arabic, Middle Eastern friends there, like my closest friends. Okay, sorry. Like my closest friends are like Arab or something. And we have conversations all the time, and
I can hear you, it's okay.
Okay. And we have conversations all the time about the conflict, because obviously dialogue is very important. And some of my friends, we talk about it, and they're like, oh, yeah, like we need to just like peace, whatnot, like whatever, blah blah blah, not blah. You know what I mean?
I don't know. I mean, don't worry.
And some of my friends still, it's the way they're raised. Many people, as you just said, like kids are what you raise them to be. They absorb everything around them. So they were taught from a young age that Jews are the enemy. So like I have a lot of friends. My bat mitzvah like last year or something, so quite recently, and some of my friends didn't come or weren't allowed to come by their parents because I was Jewish. They were like Muslim and they're not allowed to go. Even though like we hang out all the time, my closest friends, they weren't allowed to come because of the conflict. And I don't know, that obviously was very hurtful, but at the end of the day, it's not their fault, it stems from the parents. And just like linking this back to racism, like, you know, blacks and whites, like in America, people nowadays still, like the older generations, or like, not like that, but like the older generations, some of them still, you know, are very close-minded, were like, know what they raised, they don't have anything like modern or progressive to compare it to, but like nowadays with social media, you say anything racist, like you're done, like that's not acceptable. And I think we don't have that same conversation around other races, so like not just black people and white people, we don't have the same conversation around like Jews and Arabs and people from the Middle East and like all different ethnicities. It's very focused on these two, and I think there does need to be more of a conversation around that. And I was just kind of wondering how you would go about that. And also, just at the very end, sorry, I love your podcast. And also, I had a conversation with my friend the other day, just on what you just said. I had a conversation with my friend. I was like, oh yeah, there's this guy with a podcast. He's like a Palestinian, Israeli citizen or whatever. And she was like, wait, that's possible? Like, you can do that? And I'm like, yes, it's a thing. So I think, I don't know.
2 million people.
Exactly. No, so like you really, I don't know. And then we had a whole conversation, and now like we understand each other more. So yeah.
Nice. Thank you so
That
much.
made any sense.
One question to you. Was this before or after October 7th?
After.
I can see more hands going up, but it's actually 10 to 9, so...
I'll be quick.
Yeah?
I'll be
Okay.
quick. I know it doesn't look like it, but I'll try. First of all, I think also the October 7th created more hostility than maybe it was before. One of the issues that you're right, that the issue that people talk about skin color and black and white, and they miss the religious element and different, like also people communities that also exist in the UK. And I think that is a UK problem, and European and American, like it's an international community problem that needs to be addressed as well. And thankfully, like the organization we came with, Solutions Not Sides, is really doing an amazing job in that. We're coming to high schools, a Palestinian and an Israeli, and we're talking to these groups. And we've talked, for instance, to an all-Arab class, and at the end they told us, like, thank you so much, I've never heard a perspective like this before. Like, it was really like, but they were open to it. They weren't closed to it. So that was really heartwarming for us. And school kids, like honestly, kids here are really smart. Like, oh my God, they know way more than I did in their age. So the education system is good, but it can be done much, much better. And maybe they can come to your school as well. Like the organization, like bringing speakers. Yeah, maybe they can come to your school and talk to the students. I think these conversations and humanizing the others, because we're not coming as political speakers. We're telling our personal story. So it really creates that humanization of, you know, these people with their experiences. And there is an Israeli who's working in Gaza and trying to figure out humanitarian aid. And there are Palestinians who want to live in peace with Israelis at the end. You know, I've had, and I'm trying to bring their voices out there, and like also to that community, like that. Not all the Palestinians. Yes, are there people in Gaza who still want war? Yeah, they exist. But are there Gazans who really are desperate for a better reality and peace? They also exist. But that polarization is preventing them from being outspoken. That's what I'm here for. I had a conversation with someone like that from Gaza. He literally pulled out he was with me on the phone. He pulled out his daughter out of the rubble. And the only surviving member of his family. And he told me, Ibrahim, I don't care where they put the border. I don't care. I don't want revenge. I don't want war. You want to put it here? You want to put it there? Put it wherever you want. Let these politicians figure it out and put a border. Just leave me alone. The only thing I want is that my only surviving daughter to live. She's the only thing I have left. And just like any other child in the world deserves to live, my child deserves to live. And that's all I want in this world. So these people exist. And I'm really sorry that also happened to you. Like, it's really frustrating. But yeah, we can create that humanization. And that something similar happened to me where when I was working in Tiberias, I was worried that I'm the only Arab waiter in the restaurant, and they're all Jewish with me. And I was concerned. Funny enough, we had two groups in that restaurant. There was the Ashkenazi kids and the Mizrahi kids. And God knows they hated each other for some reason. And I was the only one who's friends with both. So I was connecting, but like whenever they had problems, I'm the mediator. But one time I had one waitress, and that would be my advice to you, is that we create change by being who we are. I had one new waitress that I taught how to do the job and whatever, because I was in that job for a long time. She comes in her first week. She tells me, Ibrahim, don't be offended. A great heads up. Don't be offended. I don't like Arabs. Okay? I could have done it. I could have dealt with it in two ways. One, I can be offended, and I'm allowed to be offended. That's very offensive. But I, like everybody else that I met in that restaurant, was really open and welcome and friendly. And I decided that I'm gonna continue working with her professionally and treat her as kindly as I've treated every single new waiter that came into this restaurant, as if she never said that sentence. A year later, I was invited to her wedding. She told me, you're my only Arab friend. I'm like, I'm your first. So I hope that helps. But we can create a change in other people's hearts and minds. And it doesn't happen on its own. For instance, the black community in the US, without going and having Martin Luther King and marching, white people were just going to wake up and have an epiphany out of nowhere and say, you know what, today I'm going to stop being racist to black people. You create the change. And you show people that there are these people who are different than what you thought. And it's by the people. It's we create that change in people's hearts and minds. This is our last question for tonight. You can collect two and I'll together.
Hi, I would like to make an unlikely analogy.
Thank you so much.
And which I hope will give you hope and give us all hope. When we think about Northern Ireland, there's a sort of misconception that the solution was created by top politicians, the American president, and etc., Tony Blair, etc., etc. What we tend to forget is that there was a 40, 50-year history of small groups everywhere in villages and small towns, constantly working to bring people together and keep people together. And I think what is probably needed is the stuff that you're doing, which is sort of equivalent to what happened in Northern Ireland villages and schools and churches, etc. And hopefully some politicians in the future who will harvest that, what's been growing, and then put the icing on the cake and create the solution.
Amen.
And I think, we tend to forget this sort of work that is equivalent to your work in Northern Ireland. It's not really part of the history that we in Britain remember.
Rachel from OMEP is nodding vigorously, having her own work vindicated.
Hi, hello.
I can go forever.
Hi, I'm Maggie. I'm Irish, very poor Catholic as well, but a governor on a Jewish liberal school, primary school in southwest London. So you're very welcome to come if you'd ever like to celebrate Shabbat. with a whole range of children. My observation is the difference between Oslo and that sort of time when there might have been an opportunity for peace. The difference now is the rise of the far right. And I wonder what your thoughts are on that and how moderate Palestinians and moderate Jewish Israelis can cope with that on top of everything else.
If you've got a question, you've got 5 seconds to... Okay, go on, Sandra.
So now, I'm just going to follow on from Maggie's, because in one of your podcast episodes, you interviewed this guy who founded this group called Anachnu, who's a religious West Bank settler with a peace plan. So that's amazing.
She's answering the question. Love it, from the podcast. Thank you so much. But yeah, these people also exist. People who, this guy lived as a settler, realized that this can't continue anymore, and now he's working inside the settlements to change their perception of the understanding that without creation of two states, we're never gonna have peace. But also, I would say, and this is something, for instance, one day before I flew here, I was in a conference for Mitvim, which is a think tank, it's basically the base of the left in Israel think tank. And I was asked to speak, and the topic was hope. Yair Lapid, who is the head of the opposition, he spoke, and he talked about the new government that they're going to do, and the new government that is going to be there, and how they're going to change this government, and top it down, and all these beautiful things. And obviously, he ended the speech and went home. And it's the base of the left. Dude, this is your base. Sit down and listen to what people have to say. He just spoke and left. When I got to speak, I told the people in the crowd, guys, I have news for you. Without us, he has no ability to create a new government. Number-wise, you don't have to be a mathematician. Numbers-wise, he cannot overthrow this government without us. And without coming to our community, speaking to our community, seeing as equal partners, it's never going to happen. These extremists are going to exist, but we need to marginalize them. By working together, by bringing the Arab and the Jewish community who does want peace, who does want a better reality for the state of Israel and for the Palestinian people, in order to, because what we advocate for is that there's no Israeli security without Palestinian liberation, just as much as there's no Palestinian liberation without Israeli security. These two things have to come together, and we can bring it together. And they need to see us as partners, because you know what? The last elections, they never come to us. Every time Netanyahu, he feels the pressure of the elections, he uses us as a trump card. The Arabs are going to vote, and he makes the left becomes scared of us. They don't talk about us because they think that they will become delegitimized in the majority of the Israeli public. So they stop talking about the Arab community. And then the only one that came to an Arab town, to Nazareth, was Netanyahu. And the only one who had a master poster in Shfaram, in Arabic, vote for Abu Yair, which is his nickname in Arabic, was Netanyahu. So the left needs to be bold, I was going to say another word, but be bold, and to see us as a legitimate partner once and for all, and realize that without us, they have no skin. They have no ability to create a change. And they need to see us as equal partners. And with that, with the Irish and the Northern Irish, I would argue that, if it's possible for them, why isn't it possible for us? Are the Irish and the Northern Irish better than we are? Is the black community in America changing, their reality and having from slavery up to a president better than we are? They're not better than we are. We're just as good. And if they're able to do it, why can't we? And with that note, I'll say thank you again, and remind you that we all deserve better. Thank you.
Can we once once again say a very massive thank you to Ibrahim. This is his last stop, I think, your last official speaking engagement while in the UK.
2 weeks.
For 2 weeks.
No, I've been speaking for 2 straight weeks.
Thank you to Yachad and Olmec for bringing Ibrahim here and for all that you are doing. And I'm sure for anybody who wants to support these organizations, they've all
follow
got
Yachad. You know, like talk about Israelis who want peace. One of the amazing people who work in Yachad is Mageni Non. If you don't know him, you have to know him. He's also working with Yachad, and we're together. By the way, me and him are going to speak together at Limud this year. So, and I'll be there. I'm here to speak to the Jewish community, and these amazing people of Yachad who are doing incredible work. And they're bringing another Palestinian. I'm not the only Palestinian out there, guys. They're bringing another Palestinian. So also follow their work and the amazing things that Yachad do, because we have to do it together, just like what Yachad is.
Absolutely. So thank you very much. Can I encourage you all, if you'd like to come to other things here, we're here every Friday night and Saturday morning. We also have a festival coming up called Hanukkah. It starts on the 25th of December. I know some of you might be otherwise engaged, but please do come along for, we've got stuff going on nearly every night. And then our next big speaker talk is on the 11th of January. And that's Rachel Shabi is coming to talk about her book Off-White, about anti-Semitism. So please do, if you're not already, subscribe to the mailing list, come along to things, get involved in the life of the community. We'd love to see more of you. Good night.
Thank you, Albert. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.